Excitement fluttered in my stomach as I logged into my online savings account, ready to print out the statement for proof of funds. But the number that greeted me wasn't the comforting sum I expected. It was a fraction of it. A gaping hole where my future used to be. Panic seized me, cold and sharp. I refreshed the page, thinking it was a glitch, a mistake. But the number remained stubbornly, cruelly low. My name is Emma Carter, and at 25, I felt like my life was a carefully constructed sandcastle about to be devoured by a relentless tide. It all started with Jake, my brother. Jake, the golden child. Jake, who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. I loved him, I really did, but a simmering resentment always bubbled beneath the surface. He was charming, charismatic, and utterly irresponsible. Dad always bailed him out, Mom always made excuses. A new car? A failed business venture? No problem. The bank of Mom and Dad was always open. I, on the other hand, was the responsible one. Straight A's, part-time job, meticulous savings. My college fund was my pride and joy, a tangible representation of my hard work and future aspirations. It was my escape route, my ticket to a life beyond the stifling expectations of my parents. Jake wasn't a bad person, just weak. He succumbed to pressure, to temptation. He'd apologize profusely after each escapade, promising to change, but the cycle always repeated. I was tired of being the responsible one, the one who always understood, the one who always forgave. Deep down, I knew something like this was coming. I just never imagined it would be my college fund. The betrayal cut deeper than any I'd felt before. This wasn't just about money, it was about my future, my dreams, my very identity. Jake's irresponsibility wasn't just a matter of poor choices, it was woven into the fabric of his being. He bounced from job to job, each one lasting shorter than the last. He'd start with enthusiasm, brimming with ideas, but soon boredom would set in, followed by a string of excuses and, eventually, termination. Our parents always cushioned his fall. He just hasn't found his passion yet, Mom would say, her voice laced with unwavering belief. Dad would nod in agreement, pulling out his checkbook. A little investment can go a long way. The investments never paid off. There was the artisanal coffee shop that served lukewarm drinks and even colder pastries. The online clothing boutique that sold overpriced, ill-fitting garments. The app development venture that never made it past the brainstorming stage. Each failure was met with a shrug and a fresh start, courtesy of Mom and Dad. Meanwhile, I watched, seething. I worked weekends at the local diner, flipping burgers and wiping tables, saving every penny. I dreamed of escaping our small town, of attending a prestigious university, of building a life on my own terms. My parents praised my diligence, but their actions spoke louder than words. They were preparing Jake for a life of dependence, while I was expected to be self-sufficient, to pick up the pieces when he inevitably faltered. The unfairness of it all felt like a physical weight, pressing down on me, suffocating my dreams. And I knew, deep down, that this pattern would continue until I broke free. The bombshell dropped on a Tuesday afternoon. I'd taken the day off from the diner to finalize my college applications. Excitement fluttered in my stomach as I logged into my online savings account, ready to print out the statement for proof of funds. But the number that greeted me wasn't the comforting sum I expected. It was a fraction of it. A gaping hole where my future used to be. Panic seized me, cold and sharp. I refreshed the page, thinking it was a glitch, a mistake. But the number remained stubbornly, cruelly low. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. My breath hitched in my throat. I scrolled through the transaction history, my eyes scanning for an explanation, a mistake, anything. And then I saw it, a series of large withdrawals, labeled family expense. Family expense? My voice was barely a whisper. I knew, instinctively, what had happened. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Jake. His latest business venture must have tanked. And my college fund was the collateral damage. My parents, in their infinite wisdom, had sacrificed my future for their golden child's fleeting happiness. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The air in the room seemed to thin, making it hard to breathe. My carefully constructed world crumbled around me, leaving me buried beneath the rubble of shattered dreams. It was gone. All gone. The confrontation was explosive. I didn't wait for them to come home. I drove straight to Dad's office, the bank statement clutched in my trembling hand. I barged in, ignoring the startled looks of his colleagues. "What is this?" I demanded, slamming the paper onto his desk. He looked up, his face paling slightly. "Emma, what are you doing here? Can't this wait?" "No, it can't wait," I shouted, my voice echoing in the sterile office. "Where's my money? My college fund? What did you do with it?" He sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Emma, please, let's discuss this at home." "Discuss what?" "How you stole my future." Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision. I worked so hard for that money. It was all I had. Mom arrived a few minutes later, her face etched with worry. She tried to placate me, to reason with me, but I wouldn't listen. They admitted it, finally. Jake was in trouble, again. He needed a loan. They promised to pay it back, eventually. But the words rang hollow, empty promises in the face of their betrayal. They didn't understand. They couldn't understand. This wasn't just about the money, it was about trust, about fairness, about my dreams being callously disregarded. I left their office feeling emptier than ever, the anger slowly solidifying into a cold, hard resolve. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Later that night, Jake found me in my room, packing a small bag. He looked contrite, his usual easy smile replaced with a frown. "Emma, I'm so sorry," he mumbled, avoiding my gaze. "I didn't know they were going to use your money." "Really, Jake?" I said, my voice flat. "Because it seems like this always happens. You mess up, and I pay the price." He shifted uncomfortably. I know. I'm a screw-up." He paused, then said something that made me stop packing. "That's why I've been putting money into your account for years." I stared at him, confused. "What are you talking about?" He explained that he knew our parents would eventually do something like this. He'd been secretly transferring small amounts of money into my account, from various odd jobs and side hustles, knowing I'd need it eventually. "It's not much," he said, "but it's something. And there's also my trust fund." My eyes widened. Jake's trust fund was substantial, a relic from a wealthy grandmother. He'd always been careless with money, but this was different. "You would do that for me?" He nodded, his gaze finally meeting mine. "They screwed you over, Emma. And I let them. This is the least I can do." A flicker of hope ignited within me, alongside a surge of adrenaline. An idea began to form, reckless and daring. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't completely powerless after all. The next few days were a whirlwind of clandestine activity. First, Jake provided me with all the necessary documents and information about his trust fund, account numbers, contact information for the trustee, even a forged letter of authorization. He was surprisingly calm, almost detached, as if he'd been expecting this moment for years. I spent hours online, researching the legal ramifications, the loopholes, the best way to withdraw a large sum of money without raising red flags. I learned about shell corporations, offshore accounts, and the art of disappearing. It was like a crash course in criminal finance, and I was a surprisingly apt student. The most difficult part was the emotional toll. I was about to commit a serious crime, betraying my brother's trust, even though he'd willingly offered it. I wrestled with guilt, with the knowledge that this could ruin his life, too. But then I would remember my empty college fund, my parents' dismissive attitude, and the burning desire for a fresh start. I made a list of everything I needed: a new identity, a burner phone, a prepaid debit card. I practiced a new signature, memorized a fake address, and rehearsed a fabricated backstory. I was transforming myself into someone else, someone who didn't exist, someone who was free from the weight of my past. The planning was meticulous, driven by a desperate need for control in a life that had suddenly spiraled out of control. This was my only shot, and I couldn't afford to fail. The day arrived, cloaked in a mixture of dread and exhilaration. I dressed in clothes I'd bought specifically for this purpose, nondescript and professional, designed to blend in. I clutched the forged letter of authorization in my sweaty hand as I walked into the bank, my heart pounding in my ears. The meeting with the trustee was brief and impersonal. He barely glanced at me, focusing instead on the paperwork. He seemed bored, used to dealing with entitled heirs and their endless demands. He processed the request without a second thought. As I walked out of the bank, a cashier's check for the full amount of Jake's trust fund tucked safely away, a wave of disbelief washed over me. It was done. I had actually done it. I was a criminal. But the guilt was quickly overshadowed by a sense of triumph. I had taken back what was rightfully mine, what had been stolen from me so carelessly. I justified my actions, telling myself that I was simply correcting an injustice. Jake would understand. He had offered it, after all. I deposited the check into a newly opened account under my assumed name, wired a portion of it to an offshore account, and purchased a one-way ticket to anywhere but here. As I boarded the bus, leaving everything behind, I felt a strange mix of fear and freedom. I was running away, but I was also running towards something, a new life, a new beginning, a chance to finally be myself, without the weight of my family's expectations. Before leaving, I methodically purged my life of any traces of Emma Carter. I sold my car to a junkyard for cash, donating the worn-out vehicle that had been my lifeline for years. I packed a single suitcase with essential clothing and a few sentimental items, photos of my grandmother, a worn copy of my favorite book, a small, hand-carved wooden bird Jake had made me when we were kids. I closed my bank accounts, shredded old documents, and wiped my laptop clean. I left my apartment spotless, a blank canvas for the next tenant. It was as if I was erasing myself from existence, shedding my old skin and preparing to emerge as someone entirely new. The hardest part was saying goodbye to Jake. I left a note on his bed, explaining everything, apologizing for the risk I had put him in, and promising to make it up to him someday. I couldn't face him in person, I knew I would break down, and I couldn't afford to lose my resolve. As the bus pulled away from the station, I looked back at my hometown, a cluster of lights fading into the distance. It felt like watching a chapter of my life close, a chapter filled with disappointment and resentment, but also with love and loyalty. I didn't know what the future held, but I was determined to make the most of it. I was Emma Carter no more. I was someone else now, someone stronger, someone braver, someone who was finally in control of her own destiny. Back at home, the discovery of the missing trust fund sent my parents into a frenzy. Mom shrieked, pacing the living room like a caged animal. Dad, usually the stoic one, slammed his fist on the table, his face red with rage. "Where is it? Where did it go?" Mom wailed, her voice laced with hysteria. Dad grabbed his phone, dialing Jake's number repeatedly, but there was no answer. He tried the trustee, only to be met with a cold, impersonal voice explaining that the funds had been withdrawn with proper authorization. Authorization? What authorization? Dad roared into the phone, but the trustee simply repeated himself, citing client confidentiality. The realization dawned on them slowly, painfully. Jake hadn't taken the money. Someone else had. Someone who knew about the trust fund. Someone who had access to the necessary information. Their eyes met, and a silent understanding passed between them. "Emma," Mom whispered, her voice trembling. "She wouldn't, would she?" Dad shook his head, refusing to believe it. But deep down, he knew. He knew that I was capable of anything, especially when pushed to the edge. He knew that I had a quiet strength, a fierce determination that he had always underestimated. They searched my room, tearing it apart in their frantic search for clues. They found the note I had left for Jake, crumpled on his bed. As they read my words, a wave of guilt washed over them, mixed with a growing sense of fear. They had pushed me too far. And now, they were about to face the consequences. Who arrived home later that evening, oblivious to the chaos that had unfolded. He found his parents sitting in stunned silence, the crumpled note clutched in Mom's hand. "What's going on?" he asked, his brow furrowed with concern. Dad looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and disappointment. "Your sister stole your trust fund, Jake. She's gone." Jake feigned surprise, his acting skills honed over years of deflecting blame. "Emma? But, why?" Mom sobbed, handing him the note. As he read it, his internal conflict raged. He felt a surge of guilt for his role in all of this, a pang of sympathy for his parents' distress, and a secret admiration for Emma's audacity. He knew she had been pushed too far, that their parents' favoritism had finally broken her. He played his part convincingly, expressing shock and outrage. He offered to call the police, to hire a private investigator, to do whatever it took to bring her back and recover the money. But deep down, he hoped she would succeed. He hoped she would find the happiness and freedom that had always eluded him. He knew this would hurt his parents, and he felt guilty about that, but he also knew they had brought this upon themselves. His loyalty was torn, divided between his family and his sister, who had finally found the courage to break free. He wondered if he would ever have that kind of courage. The bus rumbled along the highway, each mile taking me further away from my old life. I stared out the window, watching the landscape blur into an indistinguishable mass of green and brown. The initial adrenaline rush had faded, replaced by a gnawing sense of uncertainty. I was alone, with nothing but a suitcase full of clothes, a fake ID, and a dwindling bank account. I had no job, no friends, no plan. The freedom I had craved suddenly felt terrifying. I spent the first few days in a cheap motel, trying to figure out my next move. I scanned online job boards, searching for anything that didn't require a background check or extensive experience. I considered changing my appearance, dyeing my hair, getting a tattoo, anything to further distance myself from Emma Carter. But beneath the fear and uncertainty, a spark of excitement flickered. This was my chance to reinvent myself, to become the person I had always wanted to be. I could learn a new skill, explore a new city, meet new people. I could finally break free from the constraints of my past and forge my own path. I started small, taking online courses in web design and coding. I spent hours practicing my new signature, perfecting my fabricated backstory. I explored the city, discovering hidden gems and local haunts. Slowly but surely, I began to build a new life, brick by brick. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of hope. Months turned into a year. I found a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood, far from the bustling city center. I landed a freelance web design job, which allowed me to work from home and set my own hours. I made friends with my neighbors, sharing potluck dinners and lending a helping hand when needed. I even adopted a stray cat, a scruffy tabby I named Bandit, who quickly became my constant companion. My new life wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I was living paycheck to paycheck, but I was making it work. I was learning new skills, challenging myself, and growing as a person. I was finally free from the shadow of my family's expectations, free to be myself, whoever that might be. One day, while checking my mail, I found a letter. It was postmarked from my hometown, and my heart skipped a beat. I hesitated before opening it, my hands trembling slightly. I recognized Jake's handwriting on the envelope. Inside, a single sheet of paper contained a short, heartfelt message. "Emma," he wrote, "I understand why you did what you did. I'm not angry. I'm angry at Mom and Dad. They deserved it. I hope you're happy. Be safe. Love, Jake." Tears welled up in my eyes as I read his words. A wave of relief washed over me, easing the guilt that had been gnawing at me for so long. He understood. He forgave me. And he was supporting me, even from afar. It was the reassurance I desperately needed, a sign that I hadn't completely destroyed everything. With Jake's letter as a catalyst, I began to think more strategically about the money I had taken. It wasn't just about escaping, it was about building a future, a secure one. I consulted with a financial advisor, under my assumed name, of course, and we developed a plan to invest the remaining funds wisely. I diversified my portfolio, investing in stocks, bonds, and real estate. I also set aside a portion of the money for charitable donations, focusing on organizations that supported education and financial literacy for underprivileged youth. I felt a sense of responsibility to use the money for good, to honor Jake's sacrifice and to make amends for my past actions. I also started volunteering at a local community center, teaching web design skills to teenagers from low-income families. It was incredibly rewarding to see them learn and grow, to empower them with the skills they needed to succeed. I realized that I had a passion for teaching, a desire to help others achieve their dreams. The money from Jake's trust fund had given me a second chance, a chance to build a better life for myself and to make a positive impact on the world. I was no longer just running away from my past, I was running towards a future filled with purpose and meaning. I was finally becoming the person I was always meant to be. 3 years passed. I had built a solid reputation as a freelance web designer, earning a comfortable living and enjoying my independence. I had traveled to several countries, immersing myself in different cultures and expanding my horizons. I was happy, genuinely happy, for the first time in my life. One afternoon, while grabbing a coffee at a local cafe, I saw someone I recognized. It was Mrs. Davison, my old high school English teacher. She was standing in line, chatting with a friend, her back to me. My heart pounded in my chest. My palms were sweating. Should I run? Should I hide? Or should I just pretend I didn't see her? I took a deep breath and tried to calm myself. I had changed my appearance, my name, my entire life. What were the chances she would recognize me? But as she turned around, our eyes met. For a split second, her expression was blank. Then, a flicker of recognition crossed her face. "Emma," she said, her voice hesitant. My heart sank. It was over. My carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down around me. I forced a smile, trying to appear calm and collected. "I'm sorry," I said, "I think you have me confused with someone else. My name is Sarah." She studied me for a moment, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Sarah? But you look so much like—" "It's a common face," I interrupted, my voice trembling slightly. "I assure you, I've never been to your town." She seemed unconvinced, but she shrugged. "Well, you could be her twin." She smiled. "It was nice meeting you, Sarah." She turned back to her friend, and I quickly made my escape, my heart still pounding in my chest. I had dodged a bullet, but I knew it was only a matter of time before someone else recognized me. I couldn't keep running forever. I had to find a way to resolve this, to face my past and to finally find peace. But how? Back in my hometown, Jake finally confronted our parents. He had been putting it off for years, avoiding conflict, but the news of Mrs. Davison's encounter had reached him through the grapevine. He knew Emma was living with constant fear, and he couldn't stand by and do nothing. He sat them down in the living room, his voice calm but firm. "I know about Emma," he said. "I know she took my trust fund." Mom burst into tears. Dad remained silent, his gaze fixed on the floor. "And I know why she did it," Jake continued. "You stole her future. You gave everything to me, even when I didn't deserve it. You left her with nothing." "We did what we thought was best," Mom sobbed. "Best for who?" "For me?" Jake said, his voice rising. "I didn't need your help. I needed you to believe in Emma, to support her dreams, to treat her fairly." He then revealed that he had known all along about Emma's plan, that he had helped her, that he supported her decision. He told them about the money he had secretly deposited in her account over the years, knowing they would eventually betray her. Dad finally looked up, his face etched with shame. "We messed up, didn't we?" "You messed up badly," Jake said. "And now you have to live with the consequences. You lost your daughter. And it's all your fault." He stood up to leave, adding, "I'm going to try and build a relationship with Emma, with or without you." My parents, devastated by Jake's words and consumed by guilt, began a desperate search for me. They hired a private investigator, plastered my picture on social media, and even appeared on a local news segment, begging me to come home. I watched the news segment from my apartment, Bandit curled up on my lap. I felt a pang of sympathy for them, seeing the pain in their eyes, hearing the desperation in their voices. But I also felt a sense of vindication. They were finally understanding the consequences of their actions. The private investigator tracked me down within a few weeks, but I refused to meet with him. I sent him a message through an untraceable email address, telling him to leave me alone and to let my parents know that I was safe and happy. My parents continued to try to contact me, sending letters and emails, leaving voicemails on my burner phone. I ignored them all, needing time to process my emotions, to decide what, if any, relationship I wanted to have with them. However, I did start to subtly help Jake. I noticed on social media that he was trying to start his own business, a small woodworking shop. I anonymously sent him a substantial donation, enough to cover his startup costs and to purchase some new equipment. I knew he had the talent and the drive to succeed, and I wanted to give him a helping hand, without revealing my presence. I wanted him to be free of our parents' support, and to be independent. 'Cause woodworking business flourished. He had a natural talent for it, and his creations were both beautiful and functional. He started selling his pieces at local craft fairs, and soon he was getting orders from all over the state. He even hired a few employees, providing jobs for people in our small town. He never mentioned the anonymous donation to our parents, but I knew he suspected it came from me. He sent me occasional emails, updating me on his progress, sharing photos of his latest creations, and thanking me for my support, without ever explicitly acknowledging my involvement. It was our own little secret, a silent bond forged in the aftermath of our family's turmoil. Meanwhile, my parents continued to grapple with their guilt and regret. They started volunteering at a local soup kitchen, trying to give back to the community and to atone for their past mistakes. They even established a scholarship fund for underprivileged students, hoping to provide opportunities for others that they had denied me. I saw their efforts, and I appreciated them. But I still wasn't ready to forgive them completely. I needed to know that they had truly changed, that they had learned from their mistakes, and that they were committed to treating Jake and me fairly in the future. I decided to give them one final test. I learned that my parents were planning to sell their house and move into a smaller apartment, using the remaining funds to replenish Jake's trust fund. I saw this as an opportunity to see if they truly understood the damage they had caused. Using a different untraceable email, I sent them an anonymous message, suggesting that instead of replenishing Jake's trust fund, they should use the money to fully fund the scholarship program they had established. I argued that this would be a more meaningful way to atone for their past mistakes, and that it would benefit countless students in need. I waited anxiously for their response, watching from afar. Weeks went by, and then I saw it, an announcement in the local newspaper, stating that my parents had decided to donate the proceeds from the sale of their house to the scholarship fund, effectively doubling its size. Tears streamed down my face as I read the article. They had passed the test. They had finally put my needs, and the needs of others, above Jake's. They had truly learned from their mistakes. I knew then that it was time to reach out to them, to start the long and difficult process of forgiveness. It wouldn't be easy, but I was ready. I was ready to face my past, to heal my wounds, and to finally reunite with my family. The question was, how? Should I simply call them, revealing my new identity and hoping for the best? Or should I orchestrate a more subtle reunion, allowing them to discover the truth on their own terms? The risks were considerable. Revealing myself could lead to legal repercussions, even after all this time. And it could shatter the fragile peace I had built, exposing my new life to scrutiny and judgment. But the rewards were even greater. Forgiveness, reconciliation, and a chance to rebuild my family. A chance to finally be myself, without hiding in the shadows. I confided in my friend, Sarah, the one I had met shortly after arriving in this new city. She was a wise and compassionate woman, who had always supported me, without ever knowing the full story of my past. "You have to do what feels right in your heart," she said. "But you have to be prepared for anything. They might not forgive you. They might turn you in. But you won't know unless you try." Inspired by her words, I decided to send my parents one final message, a carefully crafted signal that would reveal my new life without fully exposing myself. I printed a photo of myself, standing in front of my apartment building, Bandit perched on my shoulder. The photo showed me smiling, genuinely happy, surrounded by the symbols of my new life. I wrote a short note on the back, "Consequences." I mailed the photo in a plain envelope, with no return address. I knew they would recognize the handwriting. I knew they would understand the message. Then, I waited. Weeks turned into months. I heard nothing from my parents. I started to lose hope, wondering if I had made a mistake. Maybe they weren't ready to forgive me. Maybe they never would be. Then, one day, I received a letter from Jake. It was short and simple. "They want to see you," he wrote. "Are you ready?" I took a deep breath and looked at Bandit, purring contentedly in my lap. "Yes," I whispered. "I'm ready." The consequences were in, and now Emma would have to face them. And she was ready for that. Emma's journey teaches us that when the weight of injustice becomes unbearable, the human spirit has the power to rise, not through revenge, but through resilience, reinvention, and the courage to reclaim one's identity. Her story reminds us that while the path to freedom may involve difficult choices, true growth lies not in escaping our past, but in transforming it into something meaningful. Forgiveness, when earned, can heal even the deepest wounds, and sometimes, the most radical act of rebellion is choosing to live authentically. If you were in Emma's shoes, would you have taken the same leap into the unknown, or would you have stayed, hoping the system would one day see your worth?